Hey Victoria, I wanted to leave you some feedback on SA2. I think that I really enjoyed reading your comments on education, particularly in your personal experience, like when you're explaining the moments where you felt like your teachers were really effective, and the moments where you felt like, well, your teachers were ineffective or missed the mark, for more than one reason. It seems like uh, uh, showing favoritism, even though the teacher might have had good intent behind that action, but then also the idea that teachers, might have the tendency to only teach to a certain population, right? As you had explained in your in your example from your algebra class. I think that those are the strongest sections of the essay, right? When you're giving these personal anecdotes. Let's talk about a couple of things to consider for revision. So you have your definition here, but it's all the way in the conclusion. And remember that you want your thesis statement presented in the introduction, right? So you start off with a summary of some of the other authors of the text, to kind of pivot to this idea that you agree with Gatto's claim. So I think at that point I was like, yeah, I really like this movement. I think she's getting ready to state her thesis. But that did not happen until all the way at the end. So remember that when you present a thesis statement, you want it presented early in the paper, because that is kind of like the guide for the reader, so they understand the purpose of the paper, that you are defining education in this certain way, and now you're going to give all the evidence that supports that idea. Let's talk about a couple of things here and there. So in terms of your signal phrases, you're doing a good job with bringing up the article title. Make sure that the first time you bring up the article, you also state the author's full name. So this should read John Gatto's essay, How Public Education Cripples Our Kids. I do think that this hits on the summary, but you want to make sure the first time you bring in and you introduce an article for the first time, you don't just do what we call cherry picking evidence, which is just pulling out one tiny piece of the article to suit your purposes. What you want to do is present the summary first, right? So maybe a 1 to 2 sentence that captures the overall main idea. And then you can present the minor points, right? So, yeah, I think that, like, broadly, this is the part of this summary, but in order to talk about the lesson, I think that you have to, like, identify what that lesson is as well. So I feel like you're almost there with your summaries. Just make sure that you get the author's name along with fully capturing that summary point. Also, make sure that if you're making really big claims, such as making the claim that there is a rise of ADHD in students, that's a pretty big claim. And so remember, whenever you make a claim, when you're writing an argumentative paper, you have to have the evidence in order to support it, right? So I'm not arguing against you that this is not true. I don't know, however, I can say I don't know if ADHD is actually rising or if it's just being diagnosed more, right? So it's just because it's being diagnosed more does not mean that it's necessarily rising. But really what you need, if you're presenting this claim, you have to be able to have the evidence to support it. Otherwise, it's going to read like personal opinion, right? And that's one of the things that we do our best to avoid in argumentation. Anytime we make a claim, we want to be able to support it with evidence. Like I said before, I really liked the idea of what you're doing here with complex topics and how teachers have a hard time of not being able to make the curriculum individualized. But notice that this is in the same paragraph with the idea of boredom. And I'm not quite sure that boredom reflects these ideas here. That kind of feels like separate problems. So I think that this actually could be broken up into 2 or more paragraphs where you're really talking about each of the issues individually. Yeah, I think, and I think that this is an interesting way to an interesting direction to take trigger warnings, and I think it's pretty effective, especially since you compare that with a trigger warning that was effective. However, again, I feel like these are 2 separate examples, so splitting this off into its own paragraph, I think would be more effective. And yeah, I think that you're absolutely right here. That education, access to education, indeed, it will solve or perhaps attempt to solve some of these crucial problems. And I really like the fact that you tapped into Bambara here, but I wish that you had a little bit more development right here in this area, right? Because you kind of just like dropped this quote in here without kind of building on it or creating more context for it, or creating a clearer connection to the personal example that you provided. So you've got good ideas here. I just think it needs to be developed a little bit more. And I think that if you did those few areas of development, it would help you reach the complete page limit because you're just a little bit shy. Also, make sure that you include your works cited page. It looks like you left that off as well. So there are some really good moments in this essay. I do think that it could use another round of revision, getting your thesis into the appropriate spot, doing a little bit of tweaking with your signal phrases, and then finally expanding on some of those ideas that are all crammed together in a single paragraph. All right. Let me know if you have any questions about this. Thanks.